The streets of Culiacán erupted in chaos on October 17, 2019, as Mexican forces moved in to capture Ovidio Guzman, heir to El Chapo's empire. At first, victory seemed certain for the Mexican forces, but their hopes were dashed when hundreds of cartel members stormed the streets. For hours, the government fought a losing battle against a man that dared to challenge it. A single raid caused so much chaos that the government had to withdraw. How much power does the cartels hold? Can America do anything against them? Join us as we unravel how a cartel drug lord dared to challenge America and how the Navy showed their might. Due to its location, Mexico has long been used as a staging and transshipment point for narcotics and contraband between Latin America and U.S. markets. Although Mexican drug trafficking organizations have existed for several decades, their influence increased after the demise of the Colombian Cali and Medellin cartels in the 1990s. By 2007, Mexican drug cartels controlled 90% of the cocaine entering the United States. Federal law enforcement has been reorganized at least 5 times since 1982 in various attempts to control corruption and reduce cartel violence. During the same period, there were at least 4 elite special forces created as new corruption-free soldiers who could fight Mexico's endemic bribery system. Analysts estimate wholesale earnings from illicit drug sales range from $13.6 billion to $49.4 billion annually. The U.S. Congress passed legislation in late June 2008 to provide Mexico with $1.6 billion for the Merida Initiative and technical advice to strengthen the national justice systems. By the end of 2012, the official death toll of the Mexican drug war was at least 60,000. Estimates set the death toll above 120,000 killed by 2013, not including 27,000 missing. When Andrés Manuel López Obrador took office as president in 2018, he declared the war was over. His comment was criticized as the homicide rate remains high. That's just a glimpse into the massive operations of drug cartels in Mexico. And at the helm of the affairs is an organization that has existed long enough to strike terror in the hearts of people that hear its name, the Sinaloa Cartel. The U.S. government has described the Sinaloa Cartel as one of the largest drug trafficking organizations in the world. Founded in the late 1980s, it was for many years headed by the notorious drug lord Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. El Chapo was once ranked as one of the world's richest men. His life and vast drug trafficking empire have been the subject of numerous books and TV series. Under his leadership, the cartel garnered a fierce reputation for violence and outfought several rival groups. Mexican cartels often clash with one another, but it's also worth noting that they can form strategic alliances as well. Sinaloa became the biggest supplier of illegal drugs to the U.S. during Guzman's long reign as leader, officials say. They kidnapped, tortured, and slaughtered members of rival criminal gangs. It also had access to a huge arsenal of weapons, including a rocket-propelled grenade launcher and Guzman's own gold-plated AK-47. In 1993, however, El Chapo played a role in a shootout at the Guadalajara airport, and that led to his arrest and conviction in 1995. He was remanded at Puente Grande, the maximum security prison outside of the city of Guadalajara. And he'd been doing all right. As a matter of fact, he had enjoyed many of the same creature comforts during his years in Puente Grande as he had on the outside: good food, women, volleyball, and unlike his life on the outside, he even got to sleep in the same place every night. Much of this was thanks to his patronage of Damaso Lopez Nuez, who'd taken over as Deputy Director of Security in 1999, and had proved even more pliant than his predecessor in seeing to it that all of El Chapo's needs were met. When Damaso arrived, El Chapo immediately began to shower money and gifts on him. $10,000 in cash here, a house there. When one of Damaso's children was injured in an accident, it was El Chapo who paid the child's medical bills. Unfortunately for El Chapo, Damaso had left Puente Grande in the fall of 2000, under a cloud of suspicion amid drastically belated efforts by the government to investigate corruption there. And on January 18, 2001, everything changed for El Chapo when the Supreme Court of Mexico ruled that the United States could extradite Mexican prisoners, such as El Chapo, as long as the death penalty was taken off the table. His worst fear, an American prison cell, was suddenly much closer to reality. In early 2001, El Chapo decided he didn't want to be in prison any longer. So the next day he left, smuggled out the door tucked into a laundry cart, rolled to freedom by a guard known as El Chito, and nobody saw fit to stop him. Regardless of whether El Chapo was rolled out or walked out in a stolen guard uniform, it was his ability to buy the right people that allowed him to escape. He was on the run for 13 years before being held again in 2014 after a series of high-profile arrests of associates and covert surveillance by the U.S. authorities. He had been tracked by a special unit of trusted Mexican Marines to a series of safe houses. He was finally found with his family at a seaside condominium in a resort town, Mazatlan. He was jailed, but escaped again through a tunnel. But finally, in July 2019, the drug lord was captured. El Chapo was extradited to the U.S., where he's currently serving life imprisonment following one of the most high-profile trials in recent U.S. history. His jailing led to an increase of violence in the region as other groups sought to take advantage. But cartel operations are not showing any signs of slowing down. If anything, they are increasing their modes of operation, and strangely or not, they seem to be succeeding. The Sinaloa cartel remains hugely powerful. It still dominates northwest Mexico and is reported to have a presence in cities ranging from Buenos Aires to New York. It also continues to make billions of dollars from trafficking illicit narcotics to Europe and Asia, experts say. With its longtime leader now behind bars, the cartel is said to be partially controlled by Mr. Guzman's son, Ovidio Guzman Lopez. While El Chapo led the government in a cat-and-mouse chase for years, his son directly challenged the United States. Since his father's incarceration, Ovidio Guzman has led a part of the Sinaloa cartel as its figurehead. The cartel thrived under his leadership, much to the annoyance of the combined U.S. and Mexican governments. In an attempt to put a stop to this massive organization once and for all, the Mexican government acted against Ovidio. By 2019, 28-year-old Ovidio Guzman Lopez was no longer just El Chapo's son, but one of the most powerful men in the cartel. With his father serving a life sentence in the United States, Ovidio and his brothers, Los Chapitos, assumed control over key factions of the cartel's operations, mostly indulging in product, but ensuring their father's empire remained intact. Ovidio extended his role far beyond trafficking and became a financier, strategist, and enforcer, managing the cartel's cash flow, product distribution, and security infrastructure. Under his leadership, the cartel expanded its influence, fortified its operational networks, and ensured that law enforcement could never get too close. His recruitment of young, highly armed sarios, coupled with his use of sophisticated technology, made him a new breed of cartel boss, one who relied on both raw firepower and encrypted communication to stay ahead of authorities. At the same time, the Mexican president at that time, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, had taken a soft approach to cartel violence, shifting away from the military-driven crackdowns of previous administrations. His policy of hugs, not bullets, prioritized de-escalation over direct confrontation, which inadvertently allowed the cartel to grow even stronger. With less military pressure, Los Chapitos cemented their control, expanded smuggling corridors, and solidified their dominance over rival factions. Ovidio was especially careful in securing the cartel's infrastructure. His use of high-tech communication networks made it difficult for authorities to track his movements, as he and his associates relied on phantom, secure encrypted mobile phones, modified to be untraceable, and private radio networks to block surveillance efforts. These counter-surveillance tactics gave the cartel a military-like advantage, ensuring that law enforcement was always playing catch-up. However, Mexico and America are two different countries. While the former prefers such approaches, the United States prefers to get rid of tumors down to the root. So while Mexico hesitated, the DEA had already marked Ovidio as a high-value target. U.S. authorities had been tracking his movements since the day of El Chapo's arrest, anticipating that he would step up to fill the power vacuum left by his father. The U.S. Department of Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control formally designated Ovidio as a key lieutenant of the cartel under the Foreign Narcotics Kingpin Designation Act, green-lighting international indictments against Ovidio and his associates. But taking down Ovidio would be no simple task. The cartel was no longer just a criminal empire, it was a paramilitary force, an underground shadow government. Many feared that attempting to detain Ovidio would trigger a war in Culiacán, a city where the cartel held more influence than the government itself. Despite these fears, U.S. pressure continued to mount, and the DEA had built a solid case linking Ovidio to multi-ton shipments of narcotics flooding into the United States. The indictment was filed, and Mexico's law enforcement signed the arrest warrant. This highly sensitive operation was to be handled by Mexico's elite Special Forces Unit, the GAF, a highly trained division within the Mexican Army. Their orders were clear: secure Ovidio's safe house in the upscale Tres Rios neighborhood of Culiacán and capture him dead or alive. On October 17th, the day of the operation, a convoy of 35 police officers and Special Forces operators approached Ovidio's safe house. Upon arrival, the forces encountered gunfire, but managed to push in and breach the safe house, detaining Ovidio within minutes. By 2:15 p.m., 700 cartel gunmen began to mobilize. Within 30 minutes, hundreds of heavily armed sarios flooded the streets, employing improvised armored vehicles, .50 caliber rifles, rocket launchers, and heavy machine guns, effectively besieging the city. The Special Forces team within the safe house had no choice but to establish a defensive perimeter as it became effectively trapped with Ovidio. Cartel forces attacked military units across the city, and reinforcements attempting to reach the Special Forces unit were blocked by roadblocks of burning vehicles or outright ambushed and forced to retreat. A full-scale war broke out in Culiacán. Military outposts and police stations were targeted by cartel forces. Gunfights erupted across the city, trapping civilians within the chaos. Reports surfaced that cartel gunmen were beginning to storm military housing complexes, capturing soldiers and their families. Confirmed hostages were taken, with reports indicating that at least 8 soldiers had been abducted. The cartel sent a message to the government: release Ovidio or executions would begin. As evening approached, the Mexican military became overwhelmed. Military commanders warned that a prolonged fight would result in mass casualties, including civilians, police, and soldiers. The decision was made. Ovidio Guzman would be released. Reluctantly, the Special Forces team obliged, cutting Ovidio loose. Upon his release, the cartel immediately de-escalated hostilities, allowing the Special Forces team to withdraw from the area relatively unscathed. But the real damage was already done. Ovidio had just proved to the world that he had more power than his own government. This sense of impunity only empowered the cartel to deepen its influence throughout Mexico. A failed raid left Mexico humiliated as cartel gunmen forced the government to free Ovidio, exposing the state's fragile grip on power. However, across the border, the United States government was preparing a response, one that would leave the world stunned. Let's say they gave a stern warning to Ovidio: "You are not more powerful than our government." By January of 2023, the U.S. pinpointed his location at a new safe house in the Jesus Maria district of Culiacán. They launched a larger, more coordinated operation, designed to be over before the cartel could even react. Dubbed Operation Mongoose, the operation was Mukti Front. While Mexican Special Forces mobilized at precisely 6 a.m. stormed the safe house, the ID Navy launched a very unexpected attack on the cartel's maritime routes to prevent escape or reinforcements. The assault team intercepted a cartel convoy associated with Los Chapitos, patrolling the area around the safe house. Within minutes, the convoy was wiped out, and the cartel gunmen never saw it coming. With outer security compromised, Special Forces moved in on Ovidio's heavily fortified safe house, where they were confronted by heavily armed sarios prepared for an attack. An intense close-quarters battle ensued, forcing the team to clear the safe house room by room, neutralizing cartel enforcers at close range. The fight lasted several minutes, but the superior training and firepower of the Special Forces prevailed. Ovidio's team was neutralized, and before he could react, he was grabbed, subdued, and dragged out in handcuffs. The team exfiltrated immediately, escaping before the cartel was even notified. By the time they realized what had happened, Ovidio was already gone. Simultaneously, far off the Culiacán coast, the U.S. Navy executed a surgical strike. Helicopter gunships patrolled the Pacific, scanning for go-fast boats and low-profile submarines, attempting to ferry narcotics to the United States. Missiles and precision gunfire disabled escape vessels, while destroyers patrolled the open water, intercepting any remaining traffic. Cartel attempts to coordinate an evacuation were thwarted. Ovidio's maritime lifelines were severed before the gunmen even realized the danger. The Special Forces team successfully captured Ovidio along with 18 of his associates. The raid resulted in the deaths of 10 soldiers, 19 suspected cartel members, and 1 police officer. Chaos erupted in Culiacán as the U.S. consul in Hermosillo was fired upon, and fires and roadblocks once again shut down the city. Even the Culiacán International Airport was temporarily closed after 2 planes, including a Aeromexico airliner and a military aircraft, were struck by gunfire. While this operation was going on, another major operation was being carried out at sea. Ovidio was flown to Mexico City and then transferred to a federal social readaptation center, a maximum security prison. Mexican Foreign Secretary Marcelo Ebrard confirmed an existing U.S. extradition request for Ovidio, though he also faced charges in Mexico. A federal judge placed him under 60-day preventative detention to allow U.S. authorities to formalize their extradition petition. By September 15, 2023, Ovidio was extradited to the United States to face drug trafficking charges and arraigned in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Illinois, where he pleaded not guilty. El Chapo's son, Ovidio, was put on a private plane with a one-way ticket to Chicago, the 33-year-old son of the cartel kingpin now in federal custody in downtown Chicago. Ovidio's arrest may shake the Sinaloa cartel, but it won't break it. The group's deep roots and vast network mean new leaders could rise, sparking internal feuds or empowering rivals like the Jalisco New Generation cartel. His extradition to the U.S., where he pleaded guilty in 2025, sends a bold message: no one escapes justice forever. His cooperation with authorities might expose cartel secrets, but the conditions fueling organized crime, poverty, corruption, and U.S. drug demand persist. Over 80,000 Americans died from opioid overdoses in 2021, many tied to Sinaloa's fentanyl. Now that both El Chapo and his son are in custody, cartel war in Mexico has escalated, and Sinaloa is in chaos. The cartel stronghold in Mexico is no stranger to such violence, but after the arrest of major leaders, the ongoing fighting for control over the most powerful organized crime syndicate in the Western Hemisphere is unprecedented and at an all-time high. The spike in violence happened when Ismael El Mayo Zambada, who founded the Sinaloa cartel with Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, was detained along with one of Guzman's sons, El Guerro, after a small plane touched down in the U.S. Apparently, Mayo accused El Chapo's son of betraying him and delivering him to U.S. authorities. Now, a faction led by El Mayo's son is waging war against another, led by the 2 sons of El Chapo, who remain free in Mexico. And that was how the cartel war between the Mayos and Chapitos began. The Sinaloa cartel has extended its reach beyond the Americas to Europe, Asia, and Africa, creating a multi-billion-dollar industry now up for grabs. The power struggle between the old leadership and an ambitious new generation seeking absolute control has turned Sinaloa into a veritable war zone. To put into perspective, at least 46 people had been killed and 60 were missing. And according to local nonprofit groups citing figures from Mexico's National Defense Ministry, all these happened in September last year alone. On social media, Sinaloan users are sharing harrowing accounts of fear and violence in the state. Masked men wielding military-grade weapons have taken control of the streets, with the sound of gunfire constantly echoing through the region. Claudia Sheinbaum, the president of Mexico, said her government was taking action. She claimed that they were working and would bring peace to Sinaloa. But for someone like Sonia, that promise feels distant. The Mexican government has piled thousands of soldiers into Sinaloa, but has proven unable to curb the violence. The last 2 months have been the most violent yet. Overall, the war has left nearly 3,000 dead or missing. Thanks for watching. While you are still here, click on the link on your screen to check out another of our videos. See you there.